The views and opinions expressed in our program are those of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. All rights reserved. Hello, and welcome to our special edition series, SDGs and What You Need to Know. Together, we will be explaining and discussing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our mission is to educate everyday citizens about SDGs, what they are, what they mean, how the laws and policies that are and have been passed can and will affect us, not only here in Canada, but around the world. Additionally, by learning and understanding these 17 goals, we can all become one step closer in helping to affect change in this world from a grassroots perspective. Let's get started with Sustainable Development Goal number 15, Life on Land. Goal 15 is about conserving life on land. It is to protect and restore terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and stop biodiversity loss. Healthy ecosystems and the biological diversity they support are a source of food, water, medicine, shelter, and other material goods. They also provide ecosystem services, the cleaning of air and water, which sustain life and increase resiliency in the face of mounting pressures. Nevertheless, human activities have profoundly altered most terrestrial ecosystems. Around 40,000 species are documented to be at risk of extinction over the coming decades. 10 million hectares of forest are being destroyed each year, and more than half of key biodiversity areas remain unprotected. I'd like to turn the mic over to Mark to begin our discussion.
Yeah, so the answer to life on Earth or terrestrial is CO2. We need more of it. Let's green the planet. Let's feed the plants, vegetation, trees what they want, which is CO2. And let's let them, as I mentioned, this study that came out, and it's still up on the NASA website if anyone wants to look, came out a couple of years ago where, they wanted to understand why the Earth was greening so much in the last couple of decades, and it's because of higher levels of CO2 in the atmosphere. So, let us do what we do. Mother Nature will look after herself. We're all part of the same cycle of life. More CO2 equates to more vegetation, more greening, bigger trees, bigger leaves, which equates to more food for animals and more food for growing population. And it's all part of this symbiotic relationship that we have with Mother Nature. And and I completely understand, when it comes to hunting and managing, how much we're harvesting, how many wild animals we're harvesting. But as soon as you start limiting, beef production or domestic production of food, then people will resort to going to, wild animals and harvesting more wild meat. And so there's another contradiction we've identified in all of this, because people will still want meat. They're not going to eat crickets. They're not going to eat protein replacement. They're not going to eat plant-based protein. They want meat. And so, you cut off one source, they're going to find another source. So I'm all on board with managing wildlife responsibly, and I think we're very good at that, especially in Canada. We've lived off the land since we got here, and natives have lived off the land since they got here, and we're very good at managing our wildlife, and so let us just carry on doing that. We don't need some unelected, unaccountable foreign entity dictating the terms of our lives and our way of life in this country. We can figure it out on our own. We've been doing it for a very long time. And, you want to talk about First Nations rights. Well, there's a lot we can learn from First Nations and how they use the land they live off the land. They did for centuries before we got here, and we did learn from them, and we continue to learn from them, and that's a good thing. We don't have to restrict human activity and restrict human behavior um, to reach some sort of far-fetched goal that was created through manipulated modeling. It's we're not the world is in itself self-sustaining, and so this idea that we can control it all, we need to control it all, is farcical. And I think, as long as we have the attitude that this is our earth and we want it to continually to sustain our lives, and we have to act, responsibly, and we will do that, and we will continue to do that. Even as the population on the planet grows, we're going to adapt. We're going to um, invent. We're going to innovate. We're going to figure out ways to do that and to live this and continue this symbiotic relationship with Mother Nature. So that's where we can start the discussion.
Yeah, 15.3 basically really talks about the desertification to restore degraded land and soil, including land affected by desertification. As a, I mean, yeah, like that's something that's really, as a farmer, it's like, is my land certified to farm? Because naturally we do that, right? I mean, pasture land is pasture land because it's usually light soiled. It doesn't grow crops very good, so we plant hay on it. And yes, it does get broken up because hay basically doesn't produce after, whatever 15-year period. Most guys will break it up and replant it again, so it's uh, get significant yields back again. But the certification process, like, where did this come from? It's basically governments and UN telling us what land's going to be certified and what isn't again. And there again, it's just another part of the planet that they're trying to, control, saying this is profitable, this isn't, and it's like we do this on our own. That's why land values are the way they are, and capitalism takes care of that all on its own. Yes, during prices that are high, we've seen, marginal land get broken up and planted into, crops for a few years, but then when the prices, go back down traditionally, that land becomes non-productive again, so they naturally put it back to hay. And that's the way the cycles go, is because the prices go up because of a drought situation somewhere, not only here but in the world. So basically, the prices go up, and we chase that market to provide food for people. And we don't overproduce because it's like anything else. If there's too much, it's non-profitable. So this is yet again just another, you know, few trying to control the many.
Yeah, and we look at wetlands as well. This is something, again, we speak of contradictions, because their initiatives is to create more wetlands. And I'm not opposed to them, but they are a source of methane. So if you're wanting to decrease methane, whether it's through the removal of cattle and beef from the prairies, and you're replacing it with wetlands, we're just trading one for the other, and they get to decide which one we have. We don't get to eat meat, but we can have methane coming from wetlands that may or may not have waterfowl or fish, aquatic life in them. So again, if you create a wetland, how do you create that ecosystem where you're going to get this? Because again, you can create a desert in the middle of Canada, or you can create a wetland in the middle of Canada. Doesn't mean everything else is going to come along with it, because nature has a way of doing some of these things, and it's for us to duplicate it. Like, when have we ever been successful at duplicating nature? I can't think of any examples. And so, to that point, when I think of wetlands, I'm also thinking of peat mosses and what they're using for biofuels. Countries like Finland, over 5% of their energy comes from peat moss. And so they're pulling the peat out, drying it, and then processing it and burning it. And arguably, that's worse than burning coal. So, like, yeah, and you look at Sweden. Okay, Sweden is a big contender of peat moss use. So, where are the elites right now? You know, yeah, um, they're all over there. The Baltics, Romania, Ireland, these places all use peat to extremes. Florida, there has been some limitation there too as to how much peat gets extracted off of the coast, but it's being exploited, and it's a bigger offender than coal. So, and most people would agree that coal is the dirtiest fuel out there, next to peat moss. So, it just speaks of this contradiction time and time again. And the word, just because it has biomass in it, people think that it's a green term, and it's like, well, get with the program. That's a dirty word.
Because it's been framed that way, right?
Exactly. The narrative is,
Yeah, exactly.
The narrative is created and the perception is then created. Oh, biomass, that's nice.
yeah, most people don't think twice about what biomass actually is. Chimney fires, soot. There you go. That's biomass at work. You look at the bigger things, whether it's hydroelectric power, nuclear power, natural gas, like just way, way cleaner when it comes to emissions. And, that emission reduction, that's what greens the planet. You have entire cities that are covered by smog, by burning natural gas, hydroelectric power, and that's what cleans up cities. You look at California, if you wanted to take some examples from the 80s to where they are today.
So some of their agenda is going to include, and I think it's important to mention this within this goal, is going to be restricting human activity, outside urban centers, right? And they're definitely moving towards that. They want to see a whole lot less human impact, quote unquote, in nature. And so there is going to be a move toward restricting human activity, and there already is in places where you need a permit to enter some area, and so this restriction is going to become more apparent, especially in Canada, where we have this vast amount of wildlands and national parks and provincial parks and you name it. And there's going to be coming a little bit more restriction to the point of maybe total restriction, where they want to see these wildlands completely without human activity and completely wild once again. And this sort of idea that again, humans can't possibly interact with Mother Nature because we're humans and we don't understand our impact, which again is complete hogwash. But there is a move toward that.
There sure is. And we can see that in the Banff National Park. You have to pay a toll to get into the park. And same with whale tourism off of the coast of British Columbia. The zones have widened up to 800 meters for whale watching. And so you need a good set of binoculars in order to see a whale. Otherwise, you're just seeing the whale's house, which is, the vast expanses of the ocean. For the select few, you get on the right boat at the right time in the right place, and you have the right connections, you can go see the whale 100 meters, not 800 meters like the rest of the tourists do. And so that again speaks to that whole double standard, and nothing is fair for common everyday folks like myself and other people here in this space. So,
well, yeah, and speaking of that, and if you want to talk about the double standards, the goal literally starts out as sustainably managed forests. Well, if we're talking about sustainable and activity by humans in forests, then whatever are we doing with solar? So, what I would like to challenge the audience and the listeners who might be pro solar, because we're going to get arguments with this, and that's great because this will be a great opportunity for us to talk about this with everyone, right? That perhaps people should start looking into what type of deforestation and how much and how many millions of trees are being cut off worldwide in order to make space for solar farms. That's a big deal.
Another contradiction.
Huge contradictions throughout.
And what kind of space, so, does that take? So you go in the country and you lay all these solar panels and, what you say, open land. But what effect does that have on the wildlife that's, out there? What effect does the solar farms have on the environment that it's there? I mean, the grass and so on and so forth, the erosion factor. I mean, they're disgusting. They are not sustainable. And I'd say, speaking from Mother Nature, corporate structure is not sustainable to basically Mother Nature. And that's really what we're battling, is because corporate structure still wants to capitalize by moving us all into cities, by moving, controlling people in a smaller, the smallest geographical input that they can basically have, right? Not input, but what was the word I'm looking for? Footprint. That's the word I'm looking for. Shave, you left that out. But so the smallest geographical footprint that they could possibly have us in, and so their corporate structure will still work. That is the problem. They don't want small communities. They want big cities that they can basically control and provide for. That's the whole goal.
Okay. So the picture I want to paint for you, Richard, is if we were to take the energy usage that the United States is currently using and extrapolate that across to solar, you would need 100% coverage of the United States, every acre, every hectare, every square foot. And then you multiply it by 3. That's what you would need for solar to power what they need right now. And so you would have North America as one big black solar panel. And, where is nature at that point? Where is biodiversity? Where is life? Where's human life, human activity? It simply doesn't exist.
And there's your net zero.
And so, yeah, we're going to need a whole lot of solar panels out in the ocean in order to make 3 times the.
And when we do that, all we'll do is heat the ocean and kill all life.
Exactly.
Or she'd be Arizona all day long, 110 every day.
Oh, all I was going to say, honestly, you guys, I've said this before. It's one gigantic gaslighting mission here they're on. They're basically telling us what, they're putting the fear into humanity about and using all of these words, the word salad, as we've mentioned before, to make it seem like we're the perpetrators of all of this unsustainability, when they're the ones that are going in and creating this mad chaos and disrupting nature as we know it. And you can find it in the descriptions of every single one. They contradict themselves constantly, and the gaslighting is a complete insult to our intelligence, and it's deeply concerning.
It is concerning. And we look at target number 15.7 to take urgent action to end poaching and trafficking of protected species. And again, too, aren't we currently doing this? And we're implementing more and more environmental officers across the prairies, like to the tune of about 1,100. That's what the want ad was looking for. And it's like, what are our current officers doing? And we hear of a handful of incidences every now and then. This is not a daily occurrence. And just by putting more boots on the ground isn't going to expose more, because, poaching is typically it's turned in by an anonymous caller anyway. So putting more resources to this, what is that going to do? it's just going to bottleneck everything and cost fortunes. And you aren't going to deter the hardcore poachers anyway if they're looking for that trophy deer or whatever, and they've come up from a different destination. Manitoba and Canada as a whole, their tourism industry is fairly large, and so if they're going to come here and poach it, how are we going to stop that one off by just putting another 1,100 people on, like, boots on the ground? I just don't see it. There's no justification for the expense. Like the rest is kind of, it all talks about mobilize significant resources from all sources to finance sustainable forest management to provide adequate incentives. Like, what the hell? Every tree farmer that I know, or any commercial harvesting, when they harvest a million trees or 10 million trees, they're going to go back and replant it by twice the number or 10 times the number of trees they're taking down. So again, we've got more trees today than we did in the year 2000. And it's like, why are you regulating something that doesn't need to be regulated? It's taking care of itself perfectly well. It's just going to cost fortunes. And again, I see that as an exercise to bankrupt everyday citizens, to force the UBI to create this codependence on government regulation, where a farmer or a rancher can't take care of a situation on their own property. Like if you'd have a poacher on your property, Richard, you could take care of that quite easily.
Imagine how hard it would be to control or regulate people that live off the land. And so this is why they have this agenda to push people from rural to urban. And they want everyone living in urban centers. That's the ultimate goal, because you can't control people that live off the land, that live off grid, that live, in small communities. They're much harder to control, just like they want to destroy small business and medium-sized business and the middle class, because once everybody is poor and dependent and stuck in a city, they're all much easier to be controlled, rather than the people living in smaller communities in rural Saskatchewan or Alberta or up north or what have you. It's much harder to regulate those people and to control those people. And this is what they want. They want control of all aspects of everybody's life.
And I would argue our Aboriginal populations are disproportionately represented here, because they are the Northerns. Many of them are still, sustenance. They provide.
Yeah, 100%.
They are still living a way of life that was 100 years old. High-speed internet hasn't hit their communities yet. Whale hunts, moose hunt, the bear hunt,
trapping.
This is historically significant, and it's been a way of life for generations. And for them to be forced into suburban communities, like,
well, we've seen how successful that's been.
It hasn't been. We have living and dying proof on the streets of Winnipeg right now.
Even the reserve system, the Indian Act, has been an abject failure to hoard a whole people into a reserve system is just and again, the government likes to turn it on to us. It's our fault, but in actual fact, it isn't. It was government that made these decisions. It was government that created this system, and it's been an abject failure from day one till now.
Take the human spirit away, and they become very, very complacent and reliant. And that's what this is all about.
First Nations are the example of what they want to do to the rest of us. They truly are. And we can see by the record, the historical record has not been good. I don't want to live anything like that. I don't want to be dependent, anywhere near dependent on government for my life and my survival.
Well, and we have many examples where you have a person that living on on a reserve needing medical attention, and it's hours away, and by the time you even get a STARS helicopter out there, it's game over. These people arrive in a morgue. They don't arrive at the hospital anymore. There is no hope for them, and you see that over and over. Many examples, suicide rates. You look at hygiene and all those related diseases, and
But it's also their own governments that are doing it because they are governed themselves, and so it isn't all white man's governments that has done it. It's been a coalition effort by their own governments along with ours, and we're all people on this planet and people of this land, and we're all battling governments, and now we're battling a foreign entity of the United Nations here that's thinks it's got all the answers for all the humans, which are just a bunch of ideological morons, for the best that I can sum up here.
That's a wrap, folks. We would like to thank you so much for joining us in this journey. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with others on your social media platforms. Thanks again for listening.